Well, hello. Greetings and salutations to everybody. You can hear me and see me. Give me a thumbs up. All right. Ah, what a day. What a day. I uh I was trying to pre-record Friday's video uh, this afternoon, and it was on Revelation 10. And Wednesday I'll still do live, but Friday I was going to pre-record because I'm doing another live with Pablo earlier in the day. Oh, and by the way, I'm doing a live with Pablo earlier in the day. And so I'm already going to be kind of tapped out from that conversation, and then the bandwidth drops off in the evening. So I was trying to get it done, and then I just had so many do-overs. I couldn't get it done today. I just could not get it done today, so I have to try again tomorrow. But it showed me that even a little short chapter like Revelation 10 is jam packed. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there, so it'll be pretty good. So I'm looking forward to Revelation 9 on Wednesday and then Revelation 10 on Friday. And if I do pre-record it, I'll do it as a premiere, and then I'll be in there chat with you guys. All right. Well, hello, Joanne from Northern Ireland. Hopefully be seeing you here in a few months. February timeframe. Got Sarah Rose on, Sir Pierce the Veil, Gwen's, Just Vicky, Panache Fabian, Anna M, Pamela. Hey, Pamela. Julian, or excuse me, Julianne. No, Julia. Hi, Julia. My mom's on. Hey, mom. Linda, Maccabees, Laura, Slim, Trick, Coco, We Fly Soon, Linda Stilly. All right. See who the first person was. Gregory Young, you were the first one on. Alicia Garcia, Diane Williams. All right. Well, hey, thanks for joining me tonight. Tonight's Heads, Horns, Crowns, and Crisis. And I was not going to do this topic. In fact, I was going in another direction, and then I kind of got steered back into this direction. So usually when stuff like this happens, I just roll with it. And let me go ahead and get ready. Oh, admin stuff. So I told you Wednesday, Friday, I'll still be doing Revelation. We're doing 9 on Wednesday and 10 on Friday. Friday afternoon, 4ish, I think Pablo from Serpents and Doves will be joining me talking about the state of the nation and the upcoming election, both local politics, national politics, things that are at stake. So join us then. I'll put a link out probably on Thursday or so. And then Friday, Monday, I will not be doing a live because I'm going to pre-record Halloween's message that day with Lee and Gary and Mondo and um, LA. So that may go long. And by the time I get done with that, I'm probably not going to have the mental bandwidth to turn around and do a live stream. So I'll if I can create a poll on here. I don't know if I can or not. Can I create a poll? Okay, start a poll. Here we go. Uh, poll question: Sunday live or Tuesday live? Okay, so in lieu of not being able to do my normal Monday, you guys pick. Let me know, and whichever day the majority goes with, that's the day I'll pick. Okay. Uh, I also trying to think of what the notes I had were. I posted on Telegram and to my website, and I think to Instagram and to Facebook. I think I got all the major ones, but I did a short story called Ghost Towns. It's just a free short story. I put the links on there. Please go read it, but just tell me what you think. It kind of ties in with some current event stuff, and also guys, also throw some kind of my own weirdness in there. So Just let me know what you think. Would love to get your feedback on the website. I think it's I don't know if I posted it as a link or not. So, anyways, let me know what you think. I'll I think I have maybe one more short story in me, and then I may put those together into a compilation book of short stories. I am working on Blink right now, which is kind of the larger standalone fiction book, and that one is much more labor intensive. Which reminds me, I had an idea last night, but I had already gone. I was kind of just right there at the edge of bed. I thought, oh, this would be great for that book, and then I said I'll do it tomorrow. I just got to remember myself. So I thought of a good character that I can incorporate into that. Okay, got it. All right, you guys ready? It showed up in my live chat, Pete. What did? I don't see that. Okay, and then Sarah, if you want to grab questions, kind of like we did, and put it on the private Telegram channel, I would appreciate it. Sir Pierce Seville has been covering down at night and been posting them to Discord. Either way, I don't care. Either way, it'll work for me. Just let me know which way it goes. All right, let me share the screen and we'll get started. All right, well, let's pray real quick and then we'll get started. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for today. We thank you for the time we have that you give us each and every day. Pray, Father, for those who are in the paths of the hurricanes, who are in the path of suffering, wherever disaster might strike. We pray, Father, that you be with them, be with each of us, Lord, as we all struggle. We all have emotional, financial, relationship, health issues. I mean, there's all any kind of thing that's going on, Lord. You know our situation, Lord. I just pray that it would all be to your glory and to your honor. And we just thank you for sending your Son on the cross to die for our sins, because without him, there would be no hope for any of us. So we thank you for his sacrifice, Lord, and it's in his name we do pray. Amen. Discord. Okay, got you, buddy. Yep. Your poll saved Sunday or Tuesday. Yep. Y'all let me know at the end of this. I'll look at it and see where we're at. Okay, so tonight I labeled this Horns, Heads, Crowns, and Crisis. And given the state of affairs in America today and around the world, I feel like a lot of people are noticing the chaos. They're noticing the polarization. They're noticing all of these things, and I kind of wanted just to get to the root of why things are the way they are today. And I thought about going through this process here with you might help kind of take an overview of kind of the big picture of why the world's in such a uh, state of disarray that it's in right now today. So just a little quick outline. You guys are pretty much familiar with these, and I wanted to. I'm going to go through Daniel 2, Daniel 7 and 8, and then Revelation 12, 13, and 17, which gives us the global governments, that the power structures in the world, and kind of where things are today. All right. The wellspring of crisis. Now, I've broken this up into several categories. Um, because it depends on where you are in this station in the world. It's going to depend on the level of crisis that you're at, or the things that are of the nature of crisis for you. So if we look at just the broad stroke of people that are out there in the world, um, you have just the populations of the world, just the average people that have lived on planet Earth, whether you're just a serf, or a workman, or you're a merchant, or whatever your status is in life, student, soldier. I mean, these are just like the average folks. And if all of the people of the world could unite around a singular idea, they would truly be the true power brokers in the world, right? Because we're the majority, right? And the majority, if the majority was all in agreement on the same things, then they would have the true power. And what's another thing about the average people out there, average person out there? They just want to be left alone. They just want to live their life and not be hassled by the government, not be pressed down upon by an authoritarian government. Um, that's just that's just kind of the psyche of the average person. Isaiah 53, please pray for us in Australia. Hey, we'll definitely be lifting you up in prayer. And not that the two are equivalent, but I'm looking at this guy in Canada, Pierre, I think his name is Polivar. Man, that guy is awesome. I hope he's the next prime minister of Canada. And if Canada can get a strong prime minister, I know Australia can get a strong prime minister. All right. Okay, the next group up is the government's section. And that's state, federal, or local, state, federal. These are all those bodies that we elect into office, whether it's a sheriff or it's a governor or a mayor or a city council. And then on the other side of it too, kind of at that same operating level is the corporate world. And obviously we know corporations vary in size and strength, but basically they are the closest to the bottom class of just the world's population because that's where they draw their workforce from. That's who the government gets elected from. They get elected out of the populations to represent a population. Same thing with the corporate world. And by corporate, I just mean business, um, economic, in the sense of the word economic. Now, for the government side of it, this is kind of a dual-edged sword here. The government side of it looks at, depending on your political party, is where you're going to get your support from. So, in our American system, we live in a binary political system. I mean, there is an independent party, but it wields very little strength and influence. But and we haven't had a binary system for. I mean, we haven't had a three-party or four-party system that was any real power. I think the closest we got to that was probably Ross Perot back in the early '90s. But before that, I mean, you got to go back several decades and beyond. But a lot of what their policies are in place is to keep us divided, right? It's in their interest to make a distinction between a Republican and a Democrat. And so I'm sure in other, the UK and other places, you have the socialists and the conservatives, or you might have the Labor and the conservatives. I'm not sure what they have down in Australia, but there are multiple parties, right? So somebody there is invested in keeping the people's kind of divided. And what you're hoping is that you get the majority out of the divided group so that you guys can make all the rules, right? Above that is your national elite. These are more focused on your regionalized power, and you could include certain corporations into the national elite. But we're talking you have to get above a certain threshold or benchmark to kind of fall into this category. You have to start being up at the Elon Musk's Twitter, Jeff Bezos, like Michael or Bill Gates, all the major corporations, whoever's running Google now. These are incredibly powerful governments that are more international than they are national, but they live and reside in a particular country and they fall under a particular country's kind of auspices. And I would make an example of like, oh gosh, what's his name? He was a Chinese billionaire, Mao, no, Mama. I think it's Mama or something, whatever his name is. He was a billionaire, uh, localized to China there. Now, I don't think he's a billionaire anymore. I think the government took him, put him through a re-education camp because he made some slightly not as positive comments about the government there. And then they took him. He went and they disappeared him for about 4 months, and then they found him again. He was teaching. like a school teacher in some rural part of Jack Ma. Thank you. Some rural part of China. He seems like he's had everything taken from him. So, all right, next one is the global elite. Now, this is what I would call the epitome of human power. They are old power. They are not elected. They just have power and wealth. It's generational for them. It just goes from one generation to the next. And then for them, they they have more of the united world. We need to get everybody under one system, right? And I think really these top two here, they are more invested in the global picture than they are to the national picture. And then the last one is obviously Lucifer. We know that Satan, along with his demonic hierarchy of fallen angels, have been given territorial power over the world. We see that in the book of Daniel, talking about the prince of Persia and the prince of Grecia. These are fallen entities, fallen demonic entities that are fallen angelic entities that wield in considerable influence over particular areas of the world. Now, we see in Ephesians chapter 6:12 that these hierarchy there is in the form of principalities, powers, rulers of the darkness of this age, spiritual hosts of wickedness, and so forth. We know there's a hierarchy. We know very little about the hierarchy in and of itself, but we assume that there is one, given that the heavenly side has a hierarchy as well. So Satan is obviously going to be trying to copy everything that God does. I give some examples here of the global elite: Rothschilds, Warburg, Windsor, Rockefeller. I'm sure there's a bunch of other names on here, but these are people that incredibly wealthy, been around a long time. They don't have to work for their money. Their kids and grandkids don't have to work for their money. Like, they're institutionally wealthy and powerful and influential, and they seem very vested in trying to create a one world system. The next one is this is kind of more of your national elite. So this would be specific to whatever country you live in. For the United States, I just give some examples like DuPont, the Bush family, the Kennedys. I'm sure there's a bunch of others, the Clintons, etc. Now, your government, corporate, elected power. I put the Clintons in here too, just because they've been in politics for a long time. But I think they're probably getting to the point, if the Lord tarried and we were going to be here for another 50, 60 years, it'd be a Clinton connected with the American political machine, probably going forward. But you also have Trump, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, and so forth. And then the last, this population here, these are just your average people. And there's too many, obviously, to list, because we make up every race, ethnicity, country, and so forth. But look at how we're divided, though. And I know that my picture is cutting it off here on the right, so I'll have to read it to you. We're This is how we can be divided, right? These are the divisions that can be exploited and are being exploited today by the folks in the top three categories, or really top four: ethnicity, economic class, language, religion, your culture, and your generation. Now, as we go up, you're going to start seeing the divisions, the things that can be divided along here in the white. That's going to start getting smaller and smaller. So at the corporate government level, you have ethnicity, language, culture, and generational. What we taken out of here is religion and economic class, because once you start getting to that level, you're going to start not, the higher you go up, obviously, money is going to become less and less a concern for you to. And when I say money is not a concern, I mean just surviving, paying your bills, living hand to mouth, trying to make it day in and day out with what you're getting paid. We get to the national elite and above. Really, the national elite, I think it's more of a generational issue, because as each generation passes, technology changes things, the political climate of the world changes things. So, for example, George W. Bush's grandfather would probably have a much different political ideology than his grandson. Even though they're from the same family, the same ethnicity, the same economic status. I mean, they've all always had money. But what's the difference here is just the time has changed, culture has changed, so they're going to look at things very differently, and that just has to do with the generations they grow up in. And then the last one, I just kind of tongue in cheek, but you've got people that are been wealthy as a family for hundreds and hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years. We know these like eight really powerful families in the world. I'm sure there's more than that, but certainly people that are behind the scenes at uh, the Vatican and other places where the Windsor Palace, the British family, royal family. At a certain level, you're just so detached from the world, you might as well be reptilian. And I know that's kind of tongue in cheek, but like they're just kind of way out there. I mean, they just can't even conceptualize the issues that we go into, that we live on, survive in day to day. I think the probably one of the most public examples of this is where Prince Harry or Princess Diana, and these other folks will go out and do kind of charity events and stuff. And I would even say, to an extent, certain American families will go out and do charity, and they're not. I think the good ones are not tone deaf to what's going on in the world. I think the bad ones are completely tone deaf. They have no uh, real concept of the struggles people face. They've got that kind of Marie Antoinette mentality of just let them eat cake, not realizing that the government's about to be overthrown, and the guillotine's going to start chopping heads off and stuff. Like they just are completely unaware. And I would say that a lot of the Democrat royalty in America today, and I'm going to call it royalty, because a lot of these folks have never worked a day in their life. They've just lived off one government position to the next. They've never actually had to work for anything. A lot of it's because they've been at the right time, right place, right skin color, all that kind of stuff factors into it. So their wealth and their positions are not inherited. These are things that they've either lucked into or were elected into, and then fortune favored them throughout time to just be at the right time in the right place. Now, looking at power, where is power centric around? We know at the beginning it was centered around Lucifer, in terms of when Adam fell and ceded the title deed of the earth to Satan. Now that I don't know if that's theologically 100% accurate, that he ceded the ceded, as in CEDED, ceded that power over to Satan, or forfeited it. Forfeit would be a better word. But it sure seems that way, because when you get to other passages like Luke chapter 4, 1 John 5, seems like Satan is the one that's temporarily controlling the things on this planet. So it starts off with Lucifer. Then we see the influence begin to spread through the global elite. Certainly, Satan's had his man, women, kings, queens, rulers over the ages. And, prior to the flood, it was probably going disastrously bad in a quick, fast, and in a hurry, right? That's why God ends up flooding that antediluvian generation, sparing eight people, then restarting over again with that family. And from Noah and his three sons, you get the 70 families that we see listed in Genesis 10. And from there, basically, everybody can trace their roots back to that. Now, they didn't go out right away. They what did they do? They went to the plains of Shinar, and they got convinced to work united, work together to build this Tower of Babel. And from my understanding, they were being led by I think he was a Nephilim, but a guy named Nimrod, who is trying to get them to basically rebel against God. And God, instead of wiping them out a second time, he does something that's going to set Satan back for thousands of years, right? God separates mankind by language and genetics and scatters them across the face of the planet. And now there's that was the Tower of Babel was the last real true instance of global government. And that's why we see everything kind of coming full circle back to that. And that's why they're trying to get back to this idea of global government. Now, uh, here in the past, I don't know, 100 years or so, this is kind of waffled between these two as empires begin to rise and fall. We saw basically four empires fall during the 20th century, maybe more, but we saw the Russian Empire fall in 1917, I believe, with the Marxist Revolution. The When the Bolsheviks took over, then you had the collapse of the British Empire. So Great Britain used to say that the sun never set on the British Empire, and then it did. You know, at the end of World War II, I mean, their empire began to become dismantled. They couldn't manage it anymore due to the all the destruction and stuff from World War II. We saw the collapse of the Ottoman Empire right after World War One, and now we're seeing the collapsing, or we saw the collapse of the Soviet Union, the communist empire, in 1991. And now we're here in the 21st century. We're starting to see the collapse of the American empire. Okay, so now if we look at the wellspring of this crisis, corruption, it starts with Lucifer, right? It starts over here with Lucifer, and he's beginning to expand out his sphere of influence of where he controls. And now we're starting to see that, particularly with, at least in America, we're seeing it with one political party in spades. I mean, just was it yesterday or the day before yesterday? There's a guy at the Kamala Harris rally, and somehow he's able to shout out above the crowd, uh, "Jesus is Lord," and I think he says Christ is King and Jesus is Lord or something to that effect. And then Kamala tells him he's at the wrong rally. I mean, just this spirit that's it's very antichrist. That's very prevalent in the Democrat Party. And look, we'll talk more about this on Friday. I just I get it. I know Trump's not going to fix all the problems in the world, but we don't know how long we're going to be here until the Lord returns. I mean, it could be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Heaven forbid it's 5 years or more. I mean, we've got to still live here, right? And I tell you, if the Democrats get control, man, it is going to be like the hell gate, the gates of hell have been flooded open. It's going to feel like that at least. Um, okay. And then right now they're trying to spread that power down to the last group, which is the population. And this is where Satan is trying to control all of this. And he's very close. I'd say he's about 50% there, or 50% here in this last group. Now, why is there a crisis? Why is there conflict in the world today? Well, primarily because you've got all these different power groups exerting certain levels of control over the things they control, whether it's at the local level, the government or corporate level, the national level, the global level, or even the spiritual domain. And everybody's got their own agendas. Everybody's trying to get things done. It's in when you break it down and get really into the weeds on this stuff, man, it is very complicated. It gets very, very complicated because even in a country like the United States, where we have a strong government system, we have a constitution that outlines all of the powers and rights and authorities, as well as restricting powers and authorities, in particular to the federal government. Things get complicated very quickly. And I think there's probably a good, I don't know, 10 to 20 things right now that are, I would consider them existential threats that most people don't even think are threats. I mean, but um, they are so bad. And let me save that. Let me save that for the end. Just remind me to talk about that when we get there. But if you look at the red arrow down, that's satanic Luciferian influence from the very top down. And I would say, without a shadow of a doubt, that at the global elite and higher, those people are interacting with fallen angels. And these angels are not showing up, necessarily looking like angels. They're not going to show up with right, shiny red jumpsuits and horns and pitchforks and all. Angels can appear as humans. We see that in Hebrews where it says, we've entertained angels unaware, unknowing because they can appear as human. And I guarantee you that these fallen angels are interacting with people at the humans at the highest levels to push agendas. The only problem is like if you look here on the right, where it talks about they want to unite the world under one system for their own power. Like they're doing this out of a selfish purposes. When you look at what Satan is trying to do, Satan's main goal is to thwart God's prophetic plan. He does not want Bible prophecy going forward. That's why he hates it so much. If he can get rid of Israel right now, he can break prophecy, and he's doing everything he can to try to get rid of Israel. And look, we've just been through 70 plus years, 75 years of them being a nation, and they've been almost at a constant state of war. They're always being attacked. There's always a threat of terrorism. There's always a threat that they can't let their guard down. That's exhausting. I can tell you right now, that's exhausting to live that way. And but now he's been what 75 years, and he's not been able to wipe them out as a nation. So now he's changing tactics. He's gonna get ready to do what he did to the early church, which he spent the first 200 years of the early church, maybe 250 years, of heavily persecuting the church. And what happens? The church spread like wildfire. It just spreads more and more and more. And what does he do to combat that? Well, he legalizes Christianity, and then he begins to corrupt it from the inside out. And that has been far more effective in terms of stifling the power of Christianity in the church than anything he's done prior to that. So I think given the fact that he's reached this kind of point where, and I would look at October 7th as that kind of that culmination point where the Hamas fighters, man, it was like this frenzied bloodlust. I mean, they just could not stop killing. And not even just killing, but like just being incredibly barbaric and brutal about it. And that's what's really given Israel right now the justification to take out Hamas and to take out Hezbollah and to take out the Houthis and to take out Iran. They don't have a choice. They're just done. They're done. They're done trying to live like this. And that's what made the Trump's Abraham Accord so appealing to everybody in the Middle East was not they're not trying to come across with some uh, pie in the sky idealistic peace plan. They're looking just for normalization. That was it. Normalizing the relationship between Israel and her neighbors. So aside from everything else associated with the Trump Accords or the Abraham Accords, that was the driving impetus for the Trump Accords was normalization. They want normalization of relationships between themselves and their neighbors. That was it. That was primary thing. And I think that's what made it so successful is they've tried war and terrorism and extremism and violence for all these decades and none of that's worked. It's not made any of their lives better. And now I think if Trump does come back in office, which I think he will, I think that's really gonna be the main push over there is gonna be to normalize all this. But we look at the red arrow, just consider the red arrow, top down Luciferian agenda being pressed upon everybody. The problem is, for Satan at least, is that there's also godly pressure, the church, right? Supposed to be the salt and light in the world, and we're pushing back up on it. And that creates tension, that creates conflict. And so we're seeing that at every level, we're starting to see that at least up until about the national elite level. And beyond that, I think those people are all in one accord, in terms of wanting a one world system. But you can see the reason I have it broken up like that is because not everybody in the normal, average person category wants to be a Christian. They don't. I would say that percentage is relatively small. There's a lot of religious people. Don't get me wrong, but when you get down to true biblical principles about sola scriptura, sola gratia, by grace alone, faith alone, in Christ alone, and Scripture alone, glory to God alone. Like when you get to those kind of five things, most people aren't even there. That's reformed kind of theology thinking. People just people. I think most people, if you took 100 people and you said, okay, where do you think about this? Where do you think about God? I think probably about half of the group today would say that they're spiritual, but they're not religious. Maybe more than half. And their concept about salvation, about Jesus, all those things vary wildly. So I would not even put everybody in that same category. But we see that at the above about the national level, where you're getting from old money, inherited power, that kind of stuff at the national level. When you get above that, it's really just, I mean, you'd be very hard pressed. I can't think of anybody right now that is a godly man, godly woman that's way up in that to those echelons above. Maybe there is, and I don't want to certainly categorize everybody and put them all into one kind of caste system. But it just, from what I've seen, it's just not there. I mean, they are heavily invested in creating a one world system, and they have been for at least 100 years. So if there are, I mean, I'm assuming that those people will have already fled their families and like gotten away from them and said, "Hey, we don't want any part of that." I'm sure there's a decent, like a Rockefeller out there that's probably like the fifth cousin, twice removed or something, that is a true born again believer. But he is tied to the name. I'm sure there's something like that, but people that are operating at that level, they are really committed to this one world system. Hey, what's up, John? Nicola in Cornwall, UK. Hey, what's going on? All right. Let's see. Next slide. Now, we are talking, let's go into the Bible here for a second and start getting into kind of the gist of how power has been structured over the last um 2500 years, I guess, 2600 years. So, if you remember back to Daniel chapter 2, King Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, has a dream. He is very troubled by this dream. He brings in all of his wise men, his magi, his astrologers, the guys that did the diviners that did all the divination stuff for him, his magicians and so forth. Brought them all in, said, "Hey, I had a dream. I need you guys to interpret it." And of course, the I'll just call them the wizard class. The wizard class is like, "Okay, well, tell us what the dream is, and we'll interpret it for you." And he's like, "No, no, 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 no. I'm I'm wise to you guys. You're not the only wise guys. I'm wise to your act. You got to tell me what I dreamt first, and then interpret it for me." Well, that threw a whole new kink into their plan, right? Now, he's like, "If you can't tell me what it is, I'm killing you, I'm killing your family, and I'm burning your house to the ground." And he starts doing it. Well, Daniel and his three compatriots, I just call them Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were brought over as captives from Israel. It's believed that Daniel was of some type of nobility there. We don't know exactly, a prince maybe. They took the young man over, they made him eunuchs, and then they made him serve in the court there in for King Nebuchadnezzar. And in this process, Daniel begins to stand out. Him and his compatriots begin to stand out because of the diets they chose and how they kept it to keep themselves. And Daniel gets wind of this plan by Nebuchadnezzar to kill all the wise men until somebody can tell him what is what his dream was and then what it means. And so Daniel tells the captain of the guard, "Hey, uh, tell King Nebuchadnezzar that I can do it." And eventually he's brought up before King Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel says, "Hey, I can't personally do it, but I worship a God that can reveal dreams." And so he gives him the night to pray and to appeal to God. God gives him the dream, and then he gives him the interpretation. So when we pick up in the later parts of Daniel chapter 2, Daniel is giving him the interpretation. And then he's turning around, giving him or telling him what he dreamt, and then turning around and telling him what the interpretation was. So we know that the head of gold represented Babylon, right? That's well established fact. We know that after Babylon would come another kingdom, the Medo-Persian Empire. They would be represented by the arms and chest, or the upper chest here, of silver. Then we have within the Medo-Persian Empire, it's two kingdoms kind of united together: the Medians and then the Persians. And Obviously, the Persians would come to overpower and take over and dominate the Medians, and then sub following them was another country or empire would rise up would be the Greeks. And Alexander the Great, he ruled for 13 years after his father, and then he dies at a young age, and then his kingdom is divided up amongst his four generals, the Seleucids, Cassander, Lysimachus, and the Ptolemies. And then out of that, after their kingdom was divided up into four, then we see the rise of the Roman Empire. I mean, the Romans have been around for quite a while. They've been around since about the 5th century BC. They weren't a power though; they were kind of a localized power. But now they're starting to expand out, and we eventually see them become an empire. They moved away from the republic, became an empire with a Caesar in charge of them, or a king, and that was the way they were. That was like 27 BC, I think, or 46 BC, one of the two. And for the next 400 years, they were an imperial power, an imperial empire. And eventually, by 330 AD, the Empire of Rome was so vast they divided it up between East and West. West being Rome, and then East being what was then called Constantinople. And from there, the Roman Empire collapsed about 100 or so years after that. They collapsed around the 450s time frame. They were constantly getting attacked and sacked by the barbarians. But in the East, the power that continued on there became the Byzantine Empire. And these are the folks that thought that they were the kingdom, like they believed that they were the kingdom come, right? Because by this time, the Roman Empire is largely Christian. After the Byzantine kind of faded into power, we see a rise of what they call their Holy Roman Empire, which would have began up in Germania, up in Germany, under Charles Martel, and then his son Charlemagne in 800 became the first true emperor of this Holy Roman Empire. And then from the Holy Roman Empire, that lasted a little over 1,000 years, so right around 1,000 years. And we get basically during the time of the Holy Roman Empire, we see the fragmentation of the European Empire begin to fragment out into different kingdoms. The English, the Spanish, the French, uh, Poland, so on and so forth. So Europe starts to become very kind of fragmented and become its own powers and structures, and then each of those countries begin to rise and fall. Like there was a period of time when the Spanish dominated. There was a period of time when the English dominated. There was a period of time when the French dominated, and so on and so forth. So that largely stemmed from colonialization. How many colonial territories did they control around the world? And those territories would provide um, goods like bananas, fruits, spices, teas, tobacco, cloth, material, precious metals, and so on and so forth. So the kind of the mercantilism of the world during this time, about from the 1500s all the way up to really the World War One, was still pretty prevalent at that time. But we call that Western civilization, and largely Western civilization has been built on the foundation of the Judeo-Christian ethos and the Greco-Roman form of government, the structure of government, and they put those two things together, and Western civilization began to flourish greatly. And we know ultimately that the last empire that's going to come is Rome 2.0, right? The revived Roman Empire. And here's just some of the times and stuff where we've seen in the past, and really what's coming. We're in the ankles right now, as Tyler is fond of saying. And eventually, what's going to come about is that there's going to be a 10. We see the 10 toes right on each foot, or 5 toes on each foot, or 10 toes total. The world's going to divide up into 10 somehow. We don't know exactly how that's going to be. It could be an imperial confederacy. It could be some kind of a regionalized global government. Don't know how that's going to look just yet. But whatever it is, it's going to be 10. And then, or, you know, 10 kings without a kingdom, but then there's also seven heads. Those could be the regions. Could be 7 regions with 10 kings. I mean, there's plenty of places in the world that's big enough, like the United States. If the United States didn't have the government that we had right now, you could have a power structure on the East Coast and you could have a power structure on the West Coast and never really have to do anything with each other, but they all share the same continent. I mean, America's a big place. So now here's where I wanted to kind of spend the bulk of the time. Okay, so the first instance we get to see of the Antichrist in the Bible, who we know will become the beast, right? And the beast, he is a individual, but the system that he represents is also called the beast. So he is a personification of this system, if you can think about it that way. Think about any political leader that represents some type of political movement. They eventually become the face of that movement, whether you're talking about Adolf Hitler in the Third Reich, Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement, Trump and MAGA. I mean, you can kind of look at any political system if if it stands out as something unique, and there's somebody usually leading that system or that movement or that philosophy or whatever the case is. For the Roman Catholic Church, it could be personified in the Pope, right? When you look at the Pope, you know he represents the Catholic Church. Is all I'm trying to say. But the first instance we get of this is in Genesis 3:15, and this is where God is cursing the serpent, and basically he says that there is going to be a seed of the woman, which we know women don't have seed, and that's kind of speaking towards uh, the virgin birth of the Messiah, and then the seed of the serpent, his seed and your seed, and God makes that distinction between those two. And the your seed for Satan or the serpent here is going to be a person, a man, right? And so that's the first instance we see of that in the scripture. And then we get down to Daniel chapter 2. We get the statue that we just went through and talked about. And eventually we get down to the feet and the toes, which are iron mixed with miry clay. And we know that somebody's going to eventually come to rule that system. And that's just where this idea of the final kingdom, this beast kingdom, because right now we're looking at kingdoms, right? We're looking at empires. We're not looking at individuals. We're just looking at the empires. Now, we go down to Daniel 7 and Daniel 8. This should be, oh, I think one of these should have been 7. I think I didn't get 7 on there. Anyways, Daniel 7 and Daniel 8 represents the beasts, right? The animals. Oh, here it is. I see it. So in Daniel 7, so right here, we get this is the lion with the 2 wings. That represents Babylon. We go down here to the bear, which is Medo Persia. It's got 3 ribs in its mouth and it's raised up on one side. And I think personally, what the imbalance is between being on one side is that one side of that confederacy between the Medians and the Persians would eventually become very lopsided, and the Persians would become the dominant force and eventually kind of drum out all the Medians, or they just get absorbed into the culture there. Then we have the leopard with the 4 wings, and I think we know that that speaks to Alexander the Great, and then the 4 wings representing his 4 generals that took over and divided his kingdom after he died. And then we get to the 4th beast, which it just is described as being dreadful, and it has iron teeth and tramples everything. Now we come to think of this because we know historically that the Romans came to power after the Greeks, and they became the dominant force for the next in that particular form that they're in there. They were in power for a good 500, 600 years. But I guess it can be said that Rome has always existed in some form or fashion for the last, since Rome became an empire. They are kind of the perfected form of an empire. But then we get to Daniel 8, where the ram is described. It has 2 horns, and this is talking about the kind of the closer fulfillment of this prophecy. And then the he goat rises up, or the male goat rises up. It's got 1 big horn, and it goes against the ram, defeats the ram, and then his horn is broken, and then he gets 4 smaller horns that come out, and that talks about how Alexander the Great and the Greeks eventually overcame the Persians to become the dominant power in the planet. Now, in Revelation 12, we see 7 heads with diadems and 10 horns. And then in Revelation 13, we see 7 heads with 10 horns, and then the horns have the diadems. So the Revelation 17, we have 7 heads with horns, and these horns have diadems. So these diadems are like crowns, right? These are the some type of a crown showing authority or power or whatever. And I took the diadems from the where did I get this from? This might be from the Old Testament. I just think I carried that word over, but it might be Stephanos crown and not diadema. But nevertheless, we've got these horns, we got the heads, we got the crown. So now these kingdoms are all talking about the same thing. They're talking about kings and kingdoms that are going to be in place at the last days. And what's interesting about these 10 horns that we see in Revelation 17 is they don't have the 10 kings, they don't have kingdoms. So that got me thinking about, okay, who has power but doesn't have territory? And I know that there is a argument to be made for like the oligarch powers of the world today, like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Peter Thiel, a lot of these technocrats that are I mean, they're beyond wealthy, um, of having real power and having real influence over the particular industry or a technology, but they don't have a physical kingdom that they rule from, right? So I think that it can mean that, but it could also mean something like a czar. You know, we use that term today pretty loosely with political positions, like Kamala Harris was the border czar. We've got other people that served as czars for other type of specialty things, right? Other types of categories of things, and these people would be considered like the top person in that thing. And so I'll get to that in a second. Zuckerberg, yeah, social media is huge. And so that's the interesting thing about how this power structure breaks up in the last days. So I guess you could look at it in one way that the world will divide itself up into 7 regions. And then out of these 7 regions, because the vastness of the territory, they could have 10 people ruling, but they're not really ruling. They're ruling in place for somebody else. They're kind of like a viceroy or a uh, a um, a king of a place that's been conquered. He still serves as king, but he's a vassal king. He serves as a king to another king, right? And so, uh, certainly during the time of Nebuchadnezzar, during from the first to the third um, attack on Jerusalem or sieging of the city or whatever, uh, the Jews there had a vassal king that had to serve King Nebuchadnezzar, and this has been the case around the world for a very long time. So you might have people in positions of power, but they are still subservient to somebody else. Now, Bill Bailey says 10 regions already done. Yeah, the Club of Rome had broken up the world up into a number of regions. The U.S. military has the world broken up into a number of regions. We'd call them commands, like uh, Europe would be EUCOM, European Command, or Africa would be AFRICOM, the African Command. We don't own territory there, but that's our sphere. If you're assigned to AFRICOM, you might be living in Kansas or stationed in San Antonio or Fort Campbell or Fort Bragg or some of these other bases, but you might be aligned with AFRICOM. So anytime there's something going off in Africa, you might get individually called up to go and report down there to work in uh, Sudan or Nigeria or some other place, anywhere that falls into that AFRICOM domain. And so that's the way the world's broken up. North America's Northcom, South America's Southcom, PACOM for the Pacific, CENTCOM for the Middle East. So we have these commands, and that's how we've divided the world up too. So, anyways, all that to say is that We live in a day and age now where you can have power over a particular area without actually having to rule that area. And I think that's a huge difference from anywhere in the past because that's never been the case in the ancient world. If you were the king, unless you were like a vassal king, but other than that, you still have a kingdom under you. So it doesn't apply in that way. But you wouldn't be some really powerful. Let's say that you owned all the world's camels. You were the biggest camel uh, rancher or in the world, and you lived in Mongolia, and you might be the go-to person for the best camels in the world. Well, in the ancient world, you might be an important person in terms of camels, but that's really it. You don't have no power, authority, or anything else anywhere. It's not like today where if you get made, if you're the vice president and you get put in charge of fixing the border, for instance, the southern border, you could have Kamala could have easily leaned into that role and taken over and really dominated the politics with regard to the border, but she didn't want anything to do with it. She ignored it for 3.5 years, almost 4 years, and that's why we're in the mess we're in. So she could have exercised power. She was too lazy or too stupid not to do it. So that's on her. Excuse me. I'm not. I'm not. I'm simply using her as an example of somebody that's been gifted power and then they don't know what to do with that. That was never the case in the ancient world. You might have been a rich merchant back in the old days that did not translate into geopolitical power necessarily, right? Unless you owned the only source of this particular one thing, which I can't think of anything right now off the top of my head that would fit that. All that to say is that the 10 kings without their kingdoms is certainly a possibility today, whereas it really has never been a possibility once we go back into the times of antiquity. I would even say once you get past out of the 1900s, you really you don't really see that because we never had any kind of global government prior to World War One. At the end of World War One, the world powers came together and they created the League of Nations, or they tried to. And right at the same time, President Woodrow Wilson, went into some kind of medical emergency. Basically, went into a coma for the remaining part of his presidency, and after that, the League of Nations kind of fell apart. And they revisited it again after World War II, and this time they strengthened it in ways, and the U.S. funded it and gave it land and all the things that they would need to create this and establish this new one world government that is now coming back to bite us, right? Okay, now I ran through that really quickly because I wanted just to make sure that everybody's kind of tracking with the broad strokes, if you will. Let me go back. Sorry. Okay, the broad strokes is that we get the world structure here in Daniel chapter 2. And this is metal, right? It's all metal, with the exception of the miry clay and with the stone that destroys the statue at the end, which is Christ and his coming. And then we get the animal, and I look at animal as like flesh and blood, right? These are, regardless of what they look like, they're living beings, right? They might be chimeras, they might be hybrids, and they are hybrids, but they're still flesh and blood, right? They are still like these living beings. So what I find interesting in Daniel chapter 2, when you get to like verse 44, 45, talking about the toes, is that you'll have this statement in there that these things, the clay and the iron don't mix well together and they don't cleave to one another. And I am convinced that this is talking about a device, a cyber physical thing that gets put into the body, which we would know as the mark of the beast, that changes somebody. And I think that that's what that's speaking to. I know there's more exciting answers out there with regard to like aliens mixing with humans or the Nephilim. I do think Nephilim and aliens and all that stuff play a role, but I'm simply looking at this particular through this lens right now at just sources of conflict and crisis, and then that crisis is being weaponized and used to ram in this one world system. And we'll talk about the crisis here in a second. But back to this right here. This is the source of all the world's conflict right now. We've got uh, Satan and his forces trying to drive this agenda of a one world system, and then at the same time, we've got the church that's still on the earth pushing back, being salt and light. And I would say we could say, well, look, the whole world's not Christian, and that's true. You can go to many places in the Middle East and China, other countries that the leadership there is very much not. They are very anti-Christian, and it creates this source of conflict. And even in America right now, there's this huge conflict between these two political parties now that are so politically polarized that there's no way, there's really no way to come back together again. Because if you can't get behind the idea of making America great again, which is probably the most safe phrase that could ever be uttered at any generation, right? Who doesn't want to live a better life? Who doesn't want to live in a better country? Who doesn't want to live in a place where they can thrive, their children can thrive, so on and so forth? If you hate America that much, or you hate Trump that much that you hate that statement, I don't see how you get beyond that. He's not saying, "Hey, let's rally all the rich white people together." Um, that's not what his unifying message is, because only a certain segment, a very small segment, would get behind that. Obviously, the people that he's talking to. But when he's saying to make America great again, he's talking about everybody. He's talking about every American, regardless of skin color, religion, gender, etc. He wants there to be opportunities for everybody to succeed. Now, I'm not cheerleading MAGA. I'm not saying yay, 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 rah, rah, rah. All I'm saying is that that message, "Make America Great Again," is generic, and it kind of speaks to everybody, right? It speaks to every American. And if we are so divided on, if that phrase has now become so divisive, I don't know how. That's a great example of the extreme polarization we live in today. If you can't get behind that message, which would make you better, make your life better, then I don't really know what could unify us anymore, you know? I really don't. Now, with the exception of alien invasion, really that's you're kind of left to that. That's really kind of the final straw and all that. Which I think that there will be some of that. I think that that will definitely play into the last days. We talked about these. Okay, now, and I apologize that I wish I could hide my screen. I don't know how to hide my screen here. Let's see. How can I do this without killing the live feed? Okay. This is a this is just thinking out loud, okay? Please don't you can go to my website, the chart's up there under charts. Free to look at it, do whatever you want. This is just looking at the same problem from a different perspective. Okay. Now, in the number one box, which is up here, which I don't know if you can see it or not, run it right underneath the timestamp. Um, I have them all numbered. So number one, you have the seven heads or seven authorities, but also seem to indicate they rule from a particular geographic location, where also the woman who is the harlot has her power, e.g., Rome or maybe a newly rebuilt Babylon. Go over to number two on this other side, this other corner. It says before and as the seals are opened, the beast government forms offices in order of precedence to deal with the crisis. Um, in order precedence to deal with the crisis, beginning with the rapture crisis. This is kind of control the narrative, and this is who gets to control the narrative, right? So let's say the rapture happens tomorrow. The United States declares martial law emergency. Obviously, the elections would be postponed. I mean, the world would be thrown into disarray very significantly. Even countries that don't have a lot of Christians in them, I believe children are taken up, but I also believe the fact that because the US begins to collapse economically, that is going to have massive ramifications across the world in the economic sectors, which is going to translate to the political and then translate to the military and so on and so forth. I mean, it's going to be a domino effect of what happens. Now, we're looking here at the number one. So if the rapture happens, obviously that's going to trigger a emergency huddle by the powers that be to come up with a narrative. They need to come up with a narrative to control the narrative. They need to control what happened. They Satan, remember, he's at the very top of that list. He does not want people knowing that it was a rapture. So this is where I think UFOs, all that stuff will come in, and people are going to be confused. I mean, they're going to be uh, not understanding what's happening at this time. A bunch of people are disappearing at the same time all these UFOs show up. Now, with that said, I feel like there therein lies the global elite are going to push down the narrative because they're working directly for Satan and his fallen entities. They're going to begin to push down the narrative that this was not the rapture, this was Gaia, this was global warming, global cooling, whatever. They're going to come up with something, but it's going to be anything but the rapture. Right at the same time that here at the local, at the bottom level, where social media is dominating everything, there's people like me and the Tom Hughes and Pablo and Tyler and Chooch and Barry and all these different folks, Carol Bay. We're all online always talking about the um, the rapture of the church. This is the last days, the last moments. We're going through all of our reasoning, making videos, doing presentations, we're writing books, we're writing articles. I mean, we're getting out there. We're getting the word's getting out there, right? You'd be hard pressed nowadays, with TikTok and how effective a lot of ministries have begun to use TikTok and other platforms, Twitch and stuff, to really get the message out there that hey, we're something's about to happen. And I got to believe that just as the doors for the missions closed because churches are closing at a record rate around the world, and that dries up missions, the mission field, because now there's not as much money or resources to push people out. At the same time, this door opens for social media, and now we're able to talk. I'm sure there's people here from all over. If you're from somewhere other than the United States or England or even Canada, right? Just say where you're from. But I'm telling you, on average night, just doing a video, I mean, we'll get people from all over. And the point is this is getting out there, right? It's getting out to the world, so people are getting a good understanding of what's happening. And so when the rapture does happen, I think this is going to be the wellspring from where the tribulation saints come out of, and they're going to say, "Hey, I was a skeptic. I didn't believe the rapture was going to happen, and then boom, it happened." And I've gone back through as much and grabbed as much stuff as they could, why they could, before the internet gets shut down and all that. And that is going to have a huge impact on uh, those saints that will come to the faith after the fact, right after the rapture. But the next thing you would have, if you have to control the political thing, which is the ministry, well, I just call it jokingly the ministry of truth. But uh, the second thing you would have to control in there is the technological czar, like a tech czar, right? And I could see somebody like Noah Harari. What's his name? The Jewish guy he's a homosexual, is very antichrist. Harari, whatever his first name. Noah Yuval Harari, I think is his name. Um, they are going to control because so much of the world now is being dominated with technology. Somebody's got to be in control of that. Somebody's going to take control of that. Especially, they might be waiting right now. They might already have artificial intelligence, the the Skynet level AI system ready to go, and they're going to sit on it and wait until the rapture happens. And they may be getting their marching orders from Satan, which he's going to tell them to wait until the rapture happens, right? So then the next thing would be the military. Who's going to control the world's militaries? Obviously, the United States. If the U.S. goes down, that's going to throw the military in disarray. but America's got this massive arsenal of weapons and technology that somebody's going to have to control. So somebody will take control of this pretty quickly. So those are the top three things I see happening right off the bat. And then following that, you've got the economic czar, health czar, the agriculture, who's going to produce food, and then the religious czar would come in last. Now, you note that I did not put the false prophet with the religion. I think that the tech guy is going to be the chief propagandist for whatever this new world religion is. The religious czar, I think, would probably be like the Pope, and he will start to try to marshal all of the left behind Christians in name only folks that went to church, thought they were Christians, but really weren't. He's going to try and marshal all those people under this one system that he controls. But he's also got to combat the fact that a lot of people are going to be turning to Christ at this time because things like the rapture happening and the fact that a bunch of us crazy guys talked about it extensively prior to it happening. So he's going to have to combat that. But I think ultimately the false prophet will fall under the technology. He will use that technology eventually to force everybody to worship. And the reason I don't think he is religious specific, because we note that in Revelation 17 that the kings of the world hate the harlot. They hate her, and they destroy her eventually, burn her, and all that. So we know that that's not the false prophet. He would not be in charge of that thing just to see it get dismantled and thrown away by the kings of the world. He is going to be in lockstep with the Antichrist all the way through. So I think ultimately that the harlot is this false religious system that comes after the rapture. I don't know that the false prophet is in charge of that necessarily. I think that he might begin to distance himself from it, at least early on, and focus on the technology, because that's where we see that he is the one that is implementing the mark of the beast, which is this biological cyber chip or whatever it's going to be. He's the one that forces that. And in order to do that, in order to have that so that you can buy and sell and live and survive, then you have to declare your allegiance to this Antichrist character. And I feel like he fits more with technology than he does necessarily with religion. And the religious side of it will be that he ends up becoming the guy that enforces the worship of the Antichrist. Now, that's the seven heads. These guys are over particular things. Now we go down to the 10 horns. Now, these may be a UN level type of organization that begins to divide the world up into 10 geographical areas. So the top category there with the up here, the heads, these are more about things, right? Categories. These are the 10 kings now are over actual territory. And we'll see that number three, it says certain offices work together. The tech, economic, and religious czar create a biometric currency that forces everyone into the beast system. In the 10 regions are the world broken down into 10 economic zones ruled by leaders. So you have region one, region two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10, and they're all they'll have these kings under them. And what you can't see, which is hiding behind my screen here, is that these last three kings are xed out. They get uh, subsumed by this guy Antichrist. So the Antichrist will come in and removes or takes over three of these kings' positions. And now he has got the dominant position. He's got the most people, assets, and resources. And here on the far right, it's got this little king. It's got an arrow pointing down to this king, and he shoots way up here to become the eighth, right? So you have seven here. He becomes the eighth, but he's also the 11th. He was like the 11th king, subdues three, and then becomes the eighth one. But he's also aided and abetted by the false prophet, who through technology is able to give him the advantage. And we note here in number four, it says, now the beast which I saw was like a leopard. So he was swift like ancient Greece. He was quick on his feet. He was a moved quickly and fiercely. His feet were like that of a bear. He was a brutal, cold-blooded, heartless, like the Persians were. His mouth was like that of the lion. He was a powerful leader, charismatic, and together they form this hybrid beast called, we just call it the beast, right? Now, they're not four different creatures. They are simply the one creature meshed into one. He's got the best of all of those systems, the most effective and efficient things that made those systems the powers that they were. He takes the best of them, puts them all together, and this is Satan infusing this into this man. He's going to empower this man to do this, and this man is going to be aided by the false prophet, who, in my opinion, again, my opinion, is the technology czar. Now we go to number 5, and it says the little horn subdues and conquers 3 kings and takes over the rest by having the majority. He then ascends to the title of King of Kings and ascends as the 8th horn. So what I didn't mention here is that these little triangles on top, these are horns, or they're meant to be horns. So he becomes the little king that rises up, the 8th horn. And then number 6, it says the 10 kings are the 10 toes of Daniel 2. They co-rule with the regions of the world, thinking they are sharing power. The Antichrist rises as an 11th. The little horn could be the region he hails from, and then subdues the 3, then ascends to the highest office as a global emperor aided by the false prophet. And then number 7, where's number 7? Oh, here it is. It's in the corner. I apologize, guys. My video. I have to look at this afterwards to see if I can get this fixed. But it's behind here. Number 7. It says the system that was, the beast that was, which is the system and is not, is himself. Now he personifies the beast system. Is also the 8th and is of the 7 heads and is going to perdition. He is going straight to the lake of fire, and at his resurrection he becomes Satan incarnate, who will at the end be cast into the bottomless pit, but will ascend at the end of the millennial kingdom for a short season. So this Antichrist character has some interesting things happening. He is infused with Satan at the midpoint, and it seems like he survives some type of near-death assassination attempt, or they could fake it. We really don't understand how that's going to play out, but it's going to seem, at least to everybody, that he was assassinated. But then he's going to miraculously revive himself or resurrect. But really, it's Satan inside of him, infused inside of him, and I guess he's sharing his body with the Antichrist. I don't understand how that works necessarily, but it's presumably very similar to what Satan did when he um, indwelt Judas Iscariot. So Judas Iscariot obviously killed himself at the end. Satan didn't die. He simply went on to do what he was going to do um, after Judas's death. So there was a separation at that point. So it seems to me that this Antichrist guy survived some type of attack, and it's a mortal wound, but somehow he's kept alive, and he might be a I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. He might be there walking around in the body there, but I don't think he's really there. Now I think it's the Antichrist or Satan at the midpoint is going to fully possess him and take control of this guy and then use him for the last 3.5 years. But at the end of it, Satan's like, I don't want to go to the lake of fire. He jumps out of him, and then boom, Antichrist and false prophet are thrown alive into the lake of fire. Now, why they are thrown into the lake of fire alive without going to the great white throne judgment? It seems that they changed something about their nature. Maybe it's with the mark itself or something. I don't know. But it changes them from being fully human. And so it may also be that their fates are so foregone, written. There's no need to go to the great white throne judgment. Uh, there's no point in sending them there. They've already got guaranteed reservations for the lake of fire. So, anyways, let's see, what else did I miss on here? Okay, that's kind of a way to look at it too. I know it's a little confusing. My intent is not to confuse anybody. Simply that I was trying to look at this from different perspectives and try to make sense of it. And I did this about a year and a half ago. I was really kind of perplexed, and I didn't have any good graphs or charts that really showed the relationships for all of this stuff that's happening. All right, I'm going to stop screen share. And again, if you guys want this, it's on my website. Go to charts at the um, one of the top. What do you call it? Man, I can't think of anything today. Um, tab marks. The tab marks, and just go to charts, and you'll see it on there. There's a bunch of different kind of charts in there. Okay, so that was kind of my thoughts with horns, heads, crowns, and crisis. I feel like there's a lot of competing things happening right now around the world at multiple levels. You know, the guy that runs the World Economic Forum, the German guy, Klaus Schwab, he mentioned a phrase that he was throwing around at the last meeting. They called polycrisis. So many crises is happening. And I absolutely think that that's the intent of what's going on here. We're starting to see things fragment at an exponential rate, both economically, politically, culturally, religiously, every way you can think of it. I mean, think about it from just those four things. So, culturally, we've had for the last 100 years, basically cultural Marxism invade American thought, education, entertainment, so on and so forth. And that has been a very detrimental act on the American psyche. And I would say today that, at least from that cultural standpoint, we are very, very divided as a people. If you look at it economically, pretty much every nation in the world is suffering from massive inflation, uh, crazy uh, debt to GDP ratio. Every nation's in debt. No nations can pay their bills. Most corporations are significantly in debt. Banks are in debt. Everybody's in debt. Um, Even if you think you're doing well, you're not. Your your wealth is it's a facade right now. It's all about ready to come crashing down. If you look at it religiously, I mentioned this in previous programs. Just even within Christianity, I mean, how many different denominations are there? That nobody speaks for Christianity anymore because nobody controls everybody in Christianity. You know, we don't have a pope in the Protestant side that speaks for all Protestants. We have people that act like they are, but nobody listens to them. You know, at least people outside their organization don't listen to them. So we're very, very divided as a even Christendom right now. There's never been a time when we've had more denominations and more fragments or flavors of Christianity than we have today. Um, even Roman Catholicism is divided about eight different ways. Islam's divided numerous ways. I don't know about Hinduism, Buddhism, and these other groups out there, but point is that religiously, I think most of the world's pretty much divided on where they see things. Probably the most prevalent opinion today in the world of religion and spirituality is what I had mentioned earlier. People have no problem saying they're spiritual, but they're not religious. You know, so I think that makes up kind of the bulk of people today. Um, Economically, we know we're in a mess. Politically, we're in a mess. Uh, Basically, when you look at you've got basically you've kind of got two big camps in the political world around the world right now. And one camp you have like a populist nationalist group, and these are people that want to live in their own countries, be run by their own countries, and be left alone by the global, government. And the other side, you have people that are for the global government and think the global government is going to fix everything. So these are big, big, big divisions within the world. And anytime a political leader rises up that's a populist or nationalist, he's either going to get assassinated, he's going to be thrown in jail. But what's that guy's name in Brazil? Bolsonaro is thrown in jail. Kind of the same thing that they try to do with Trump. Um, these guys are shot, killed, thrown in jail, have their everything stripped from them. Um, yeah, it's dangerous. It's dangerous to be a populist leader these days. All right. What I said earlier about there being, let me get out of the screen real quick. 10 existential things that are going on. Right now, there is the loss of shared meaning and purpose, meaning that we are so divided as a country right now across every spectrum. And America was designed to be a melting pot. That's the way we were designed. We were designed to have this kind of society, but now we're being divided. What I mentioned earlier, at least at the population level, we're divided amongst ethnicity, culture, religion, economic class, political views. All of those things are being used against us, whether you want them to happen to or not. Those things, those differences are being exploited to push political and corporate agendas. And I think the issue that we have is that on one side of the camp, political camp, they tout diversity as kind of their chief foundational cornerstone, but they only approve diversity if you agree with everything they believe in. If you are a Christian, you definitely do not fall into their camp. They don't want you there. They don't want anything to do with you. You're basically a troglodyte, and they just assume throw you in a re-education camp. Number two is a erosion of trust. Every, I mean, pretty much every, at least in America, I can't speak for any other country, but uh, every institution that we've had has been corrupted. And when those things become corrupted, people lose trust in those institutions. And even the military. I mean, when you look at what Mark Milley did back in 2020, and I knew Mark Milley, like, I mean, I didn't know him personally, like I wasn't buddy buddy with him, but he sat right next to me on numerous occasions when I was in Afghanistan the first time. We're watching operations go down. This is back when he was a one star. And then he turns out to be this DC Beltway, you know, uh, I don't know, troll or some kind of a misfit creature that just does their bidding, And he's a smart guy, which is what kills me. Like I don't understand like what they got to him somehow. They got to him. They've got some blackmail on him or something. They've got him by the short and curlies, and they're basically making him dance to their tune. But when the erosion of trust goes, it's very, 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 very hard to get that back. And I don't see that as a nation. I don't see how we get back to that place. Even if Elon Musk goes in and clears out all of the bureaucracy in the government, I just I I just have a hard time seeing all that play out. We have a crisis of identity. Again, this goes back to cultural Marxism. Um, and things like the 1619 project, going back and saying that America was founded on slavery. That's all we existed for, was to create a slave class. All that stuff is not true. And but you've got a whole generation of young people that believe it. Now, I will say that the newest, youngest generation are starting to wake up, and they're starting to see a huge difference between the left and the right politically. So, is it enough to save this election? I have no idea, but there's a huge crisis of identity going on. Who are we as a people? We can't even agree on what is a woman. How are we going to agree on what is an American? Or what is a Briton or an Aussie or a Canadian or whatever. Pick your country. I mean, everywhere you look, there's huge, huge turmoil going on between nationalist and globalist, and that's kind of the big fight of our age right now. At the same time, we kind of devolved back into rabid individualism. Everybody's simply for themselves. They don't really see the bigger picture. They don't care about the bigger picture. Obviously, smartphones, social media, all that stuff has become made us as a people collectively incredibly narcissistic. We might be well informed because information is constantly being thrown at us, but we can become very narcissistic as a people, and we don't have this shared common value anymore. I watched the Pacific series the other night on HBO, and, and no, I'm sorry, it was on. I think it was on Netflix or something, whatever on here, and The just the mindset of the soldiers and Marines over there, I don't think we could replicate that today. Um, they love their country. It was a love for country. They felt like they were doing the right thing. It was a just cause. I think we've squandered um, that goodwill of the American people that's been squandered over the last 70 plus years over wars that we never won. We might have won the battles, but we didn't actually get to claim the W. Like Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, all those places. We might have won the battles, but we didn't change anything over there. Things are still as messed up as they were when we got there. And that's coming from somebody that spent 22 years, defending the American way of life. What difference did I make in Afghanistan? I would say probably negligible. At a certain point, it just goes away from being the flag and what you stand for as a people to just looking out for your buddy to the left and the right. That's it. And if that's the case, then we're not really fighting for our country anymore. We're just fighting for to stay alive, as a group of people over there. Now we have moral and ethical ambiguity. Again, cultural Marxism. This is after 100 years of being taught um, postmodernist education in the public school systems, the universities, the seminaries, and this idea that there's no such thing as absolute truth. Once we moved away from that, it was a Pandora's box that just is still wide open today and letting all sorts of evils into the world. The disconnection from nature. I this is a weird one for me, but there is like medicinal benefits, holistic benefits, and I'm not against holistic medicine at all. But even if you walk around barefoot in the grass, that is healthy for you. Did you realize that? It's healthy to walk around in just your bare feet in the grass. It has something to do with you, the electrical energy of the earth getting into your feet, and it helps you. Um, I can't explain it, but just being outside, having that connection with nature. I think most people are pretty removed from nature nowadays. I think as a society, if we lost electricity tonight through, let's say, the next 4 weeks, most people would starve to death because they would not know how to cook their own food, grow their own food, all that kind of stuff. Myself included, I don't know anything about farming. I've never had to farm, and I know how to grow plants in a garden. I've never done it. Um, but that said, I've just never been in a position to do those kind of things. And most of you probably are the same way. But like my mom and that generation, they basically had a healthy understanding of how to live without the government and had to take care of themselves. So, I think unless you live way out in the country and you just live off grid already, I mean, you're probably one of the few people that is actually doing that. Uh, that ties in with number 7, the over-reliance on technology. Obviously, everything. I mean, if the internet went down across the world, that would be like a World War III type event. I mean, things would devolve very, very, very quickly, and I would be scared for anybody that has to live through that, myself included. I would, I'm 5 hours away from my family, so if everything went down, um, you know, I would have to really think. I would have to go buy fuel in cans, fill up my car, and then get on the road and just go and try to make it back home, as best I could. So, cultural nihilism, the absence of widely accepted cultural narratives or enduring traditions. I mean, and I mentioned this a while back, but in China, the youth of this, their Generation Z or whatever, because they've been oppressed for so long as people, they just don't see any point of going on. So they say, let it rot. They are not contributing in any functional or efficient way into their system any longer. And this is how they're protesting it. They're protesting the system by not participating in the system. and not getting married, not having kids, not not doing their best. They're doing the very bare minimum. And this idea of Bailon is absolutely present in the United States, especially with the youngest generation here, because um, they just don't think it really matters. There's nothing to believe in. There's nothing for to live for. Let it rot. That's this Bailon. Hey, what's up, Tyler? I see you. Um, Fractured community and loneliness. I mean, we live in a day and age where, because we've had the automobiles, we've had the highway systems, the interstate, long distance communications, just the spread of people across our nation. It's allowed for people to move further and further away from home, or further and further away from their families. My mom right now lives up with my sister in Idaho, and I'm in Texas. I mean, back 100 years ago, that very rarely happened. I mean, you generally lived, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, unless you had to flee an area because of like the Dust Bowl era, you basically lived with, your whole life within about 100 miles of where you're born. And there are obviously exceptions if you join the military and get sent overseas, stuff like that. But just most people, they never really went further than 100 miles their whole life. And I would say probably up until about early 1900s, that's the way it was, because travel was so much harder to get from point A to point B. You either had to ride a horse or carriage, and eventually they had trains. But just being that far removed from your family and everybody, it's just been, it was too great a sacrifice. Okay, to the loneliness part, it's with the greatest sense of irony that we live in a day and age where smartphones, internet, all that stuff has made communication so easy and so, um, everybody that's on here tonight right now. I mean, you guys live in all different parts of the country. Maybe some of you live alone, and this is how you have fellowship and communion with other people, other living people. Um, but for most people that don't have this, they're just kind of isolated, and they might live in social media. They might live in watching television, things like that. But essentially, they're isolated. They're alone, and that's how the globalists want us. They want us isolated, alone. They don't want us to own anything. They don't want us to think of this country as our own country. That's why they're pouring in billions of dollars into bringing illegal immigrants that they don't have a care in the world about assimilating into this country, or to Europe, or to Australia, wherever you live. That they're going there for a better life just so they can live a nicer life. They don't care about the country that they're living in. They don't have any historical ties to the land. That's what globalism is all about. It's about breaking all these borders down, which is why they'll go down to Haiti and bring up 20,000 Haitians out of a failed country like that, bring them to the United States, plop them down in Ohio, and they don't care. They're doing this to break apart the country. They're doing this to destroy nationalism. Basically, their goal is to make every state purple, and then from purple they turn it blue, and then that system's rigged forever, and you're never going to get it back. I I will make an exception with this statement because I feel like the upcoming election is going to surprise a lot of people. Now, Trump may win the election, but I have a hard time seeing the intelligence, deep state, shadow government actually relinquishing command of the government to him. So that could be very problematic in and of itself. And then the last part is the decline in deep reflective thought. You know, Today I think I posted a first video on TikTok. Um, I wasn't even talking it or anything. It was just the video from a long time ago. But I never really got into the Instagram, TikTok, and all that stuff. And but I find that you can scroll through the videos on Instagram, like, I mean, next thing you know, like, an hour's gone by. You're just like, "What? Where is the time gone?" You're learning all this, like, real random whatever stuff, and some of it's cool. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I like watching, like, the animal stuff but you're basically it's sucking away life from you, time that you could be doing something else. And we're all guilty of it. We're all here on social media right now on YouTube, so obviously we're not that opposed to it. We try to make the best use of our time with it, and at least from my perspective, Christianity. I want to be found using this as a tool to get the message out. I don't care about building up my own empire. I don't care about. There's a lot of things I don't care about. I don't care about the popularity. I don't care about any of that stuff. What I care about is that if somebody watches this, comes across this, and they get to know Jesus and come to know Jesus as their Lord and Savior, and they don't spend eternity in hell, or they don't have to go through the 7-year tribulation, that's a victory for me. If I play some small role in helping them not go in the wrong direction, that to me is a victory. And really, that's what should motivate all of us. And I think, for the most part, there's a lot of us here that, at least on YouTube right now, that have that same sentiment. Chooch, Tyler, Barry, Chad, Ty Green, Carol Vay. I mean, we care about people. We love people. We want to see them. We want to see you guys in heaven. We obviously want to see you go up in the rapture and not have to go through the hell on earth that's coming. And really, that's the motivation. You know, um, I just the other stuff. I know how temporary that stuff is. Like it's fleeting. It is absolutely fleeting. Like I don't care about the riches of this world. I do care about paying my bills and having food to eat and keeping the lights on in the house. That stuff. I mean, that's stuff we need to live and survive. But the popularity contest, like I don't care about that. So those are the big things that I think are impacting this country right now that are almost unbridgeable at this point. And these aren't even things that you normally see on the prophecy list, like earthquakes, hurricanes, uh, technology, mark of the beast stuff. Like all that stuff's happening too. These are just kind of things that are foundational to our country that are deeply broken, deeply fractured, and I don't know how we get that back. And it's going to take Jesus to fix this problem. It's not something that's going to get fixed by Donald Trump or Elon Musk or Harris or anybody else. I mean, it's going to take Jesus coming back to the earth and him righting the wrongs and him healing the world and healing the nations. And that's really what we're trying to do here, is just to put a spotlight on our brokenness and really the need for a savior. Excuse me. All right. Wow. I didn't realize I'd been going for an hour and 42 minutes. I apologize. Let me get to some questions here. And you did say they're on Discord, I believe, sir. Let me find my Discord here. This world needs Jesus. Amen. Hold on, it's pulling up here. All right. So this is today. All right. From Barbara Simon. Question: what do you think about the book of Barron Trump, supposed to be about the last president in constitutional republic? Something like that. So I read the Cliff Notes version. There's two different ones. There is the Barron Trump one, and then I think the one that people are talking about is the last. It's called The Last President. So two different books by the same guy. Interesting that he uses Barron Trump as a name, as the character, but the Last President one is also interesting. But they're two. I believe they're two different books. So I don't know. Interesting. I don't know if there's any prophetic significance to Barron Trump, but I do believe that. And again, this is just my opinion, my theory. that at the last trump, we get that in the King James version, which is the most predominant English version in the world, the most trusted, so on and so forth. And I don't have any. I like the King James version. I don't use it normally. I use New King James or NASB or another version. Um, Simply because I don't talk like that anymore. I don't thee, thou, thy. I don't use that in my common parlance. So to me, almost speaking a different language. But the fact that it says the last Trump, and then we have a president named Trump, and he's gone through everything that he's gone through for the 9 years. I I don't know. I think it's interesting. Mm. Okay. Let's see. Gwenstone question: do you believe that the information that was leaked to Iran was legit, or did Netanyahu just tell Biden a lie because he learned our leaders can't be trusted? I think I think he can't trust the Biden administration. I think he just fed them some stuff and to watch them leak it because he knew they would leak it. So that's my opinion about Netanyahu. And here's why I think that. I mean, the guy's been dealing with American politicians since at least the early '90s. As a politician himself. So in him seeing everything that's gone on thus far, like I personally don't think that he trusts the Democrats any more than he could throw them. So I think they did feed America some stuff. I mean, this is the same country that executed this flawless pager walkie-talkie attack. I mean, and then taken out Nasrallah. Come on, they're not that dumb. They're very, very smart. I think anything they fed to the American, at least this administration, they knew was going to get leaked. So, all right. Question ready now. Question on truly investing in gold and silver. Do we truly have to worry? I'm, my thoughts are on to, my thoughts are not to worry, but really I should take action toward that. So I don't have anything against investing in gold and silver. I think that's a good hedge against inflation. There's a lot of upsides to investing in gold and silver. The downside is at some point you're going to have to trade that in for usable currency to you can't eat gold, you can't eat silver, so you're going to have to find a way to exchange that for something that can be exchanged. Which makes silver probably the more preferable option out of the two, be simply because it's more affordable and it's easier to break apart into smaller segments. You don't go to the grocery store with a block of gold or a chunk of gold in your pocket. Um, they couldn't even take it anyways if they wanted to. So I feel silver is probably the more pragmatic of the two. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Obviously, we don't know how long we're going to be here until the Lord returns. So having something like that on hand is a good investment. But like what we've seen with Bitcoin, Bitcoin was down for months and months and months and months. And it finally started going back up once JD Vance got back into the race and he's all into crypto and all that kind of stuff. So I think they saw the kind of the upside. There was a lot of uncertainty how that was going to shake out with the central bank digital currencies. But if Trump wins, I think Bitcoin's going to go through the roof again. And that's just my opinion. But those things are it's not bad to invest in anything, especially given the reality that we don't know the day or the hour. So we don't know how much longer we're going to have to live here. And there's nothing wrong with putting away money because of the economic uncertainties that there are. Certainly, you don't want to be a hoarder, though. I mean, like if you ever watch that show on, I don't know what channel it's on. It's on maybe on an app or something. But the hoarders, people that just keep hoarding things, just saving and saving, like they save everything. Like there's a point to where that becomes a sickness in and of itself. But I get your question. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it's probably wise to have something like that put away on the side if you can. Um, Catherine Cole, do you think that America will be integrated into the 10 kingdom? Yes, I do. Absolutely. When I said that the United States, like when the rapture happens, the US will collapse. I mean, our system of government will collapse. The Constitution, all that stuff will go away. And I think what we're going to see is a restructuring of the North America, which is why they didn't want the border wall. It's why they wanted NAFTA. They want it to be one North American region all integrated together. And this goes back to the 90s. They want this all what they want is all integrated because they know when the rapture happens, and I'm saying they, Lucifer and his fallen angel ilk, they want as much of the world in place, ready to go day one as they can. And so the big push has been to integrate all of North America together, Canada, Mexico, and North America. And there's just been so much political pushback, the church, the conservatives, so on and so forth, that it's just not happened. So there is agreements and stuff. And I think if Trump comes back in, that wall's going up lickety split. And then the rapture happens, that wall's going to come right back down, and they're going to try and integrate this all into one system. Rafiki, Jesus said, "No one knows the day or the hour when he was in human form. Now that he is God, do you think he knows when the rapture will happen?" Yes, I think he does. I think that's what Revelation was about, the book of Revelation. I mean, it was the revealing from the Father to the Son about everything that's going to take place. So certainly Jesus, when he gives John the instructions on how to divide the book up, he says in Revelation 1:19, write the things you've seen, the things which are, and the things which shall take place after these things. And that's how you divide up the book of Revelation into those big three sections, right? And certainly Jesus knows that we're in the last stage of the church age, so uh, he's got to know. I think the Father's, and he's sitting there on the right hand of the Father. The Father's just going to look at him and be like, "Go," and Jesus will be like, "I'm on it." So, Paula, question: What would you consider the destruction of Damascus, Isaiah 17:1, to signify the end of the time of the Gentiles, Luke 21:24, which began in Damascus with the Paul's conversion call? I don't. Not with Isaiah 17. I don't even consider the end of the Gentiles until really the end of the tribulation. So the Antichrist is going to dominate this last Gentile kingdom is going to dominate the planet for 7 years. So at the end of that, that'll be the end of the Gentiles. We will no longer dominate the world like that ever again. Francis McCrory question: is America Mystery Babylon? I don't think she is. I know some people do, and that's okay. We can agree to disagree. I also don't think Babylon, the final Babylon, is in Iraq. I've been to Iraq. Spent a long time there, or I spent a lot of time there. I just don't see how that country gets it together in time. Plus, they don't geographically, they don't fit the sits on many waters, seven hills, all that, whichever way you want to look at it. It just I have a hard time seeing that as being Iraq or being the Babylon that dominates the world. I do have an idea um, that at the rapture, that the United Nations, whatever remains of that, may get restructured in and of itself, and it will move out of Rockefeller Plaza in New York City and will be relocated somewhere in the old world where the bulk of the population is going to be. So it could be Rome, it could be Jerusalem, it could be the Neom, or whatever that city they're trying to build in Saudi Arabia. We just don't know. Um, and as you guys heard me say on my Revelation Bible study, when I was going through the trumpets, a third of the trees are in America, a third of the fresh waters in America. Those two things are taken out. All the green grass. So all the green grass would mean all the grass in the world. So I don't know how that, I told you I had problems with this theory of mine. But if the Americas, North, Central, South America, if they are so judged and destroyed through various judgments, and it's going to force people back to the old world. It's going to channelize or canalize the entire world back into the old world or the world's population. Um, I think it would be over there somewhere. Where exactly, I don't know. And, it could be Mystery Babylon. I'm not saying definitively that it's not, but I I have a hard time with that. But Tyler almost had me convinced. I was in that moment playing the role of Agrippa. You have almost convinced me. He makes a good points, but I guess it depends on how that plays out in Revelation. Whether Revelation 17 is kind of a looking back, summarizing on everything that's already happened, or it's still future, or it's still future to where we are today. So I don't know. I think we all have our opinions. Tyler says we have to talk again. You're good. You're about to be a busy man, Tyler. I don't know if you're gonna have time to talk to me. Yeah. But I don't know. I For me, it's never been. I don't have any books to sell on Mystery Babylon, so I'm not super dogmatic about my position. My position is I don't have a position. I know it's going to happen. Um, you know, we'll just have to wait and see. We'll see it from the mezzanine, I guess. Lynn Faulkner, Sunday or Tuesday live, and we have a choice, yes or no. Well, then no to Sunday, yes to Tuesday. Okay. To me, I don't care. I don't care which day I do it on. Just Monday, I'm already going to have most of that. We're starting at 4. It'll probably go to like 6, maybe 6:37. You got like 5 of us that are real big talkers. We like to pontificate on stuff. So I can't imagine that being shorter than 2 hours. But I think at the end of that, I'm not going to be in the mood to do another live stream. I'm going to be kind of smoked mentally at that point. Isaiah 26:3, Rev 3:10. I have a theory. DJT wins. Elon starts clearing out the deadwood, uses AI to augment necessary government agencies. JDV isn't solid. He's Catholic and becomes the Antichrist. What do you think? I think that is a very plausible theory. Hey, just because we like the guy politically, we're aligned politically, we're aligned, maybe culturally to certain regards. That doesn't rule them out from being the Antichrist. I don't think Trump's the Antichrist simply because he's too old. And that's the same issue that I had with King Charles. Too old. Whoever the Antichrist is going to be, he's going to be a young man. He's going to have that energy and that charisma, and he's going to have to really woo the world and travel and do all the stuff. And not to say that Satan can't use an older person and supernaturally empower them to do things. I'm sure he could, but this is his last shot. This is his last shot. He is going to throw his absolute A game into this. And I just don't see that being somebody that's in their 70s or even 60s for that matter. Did I lose the poll or what? Let's see, where is it at? Oh, okay. Man, I'm a dummy. Um, I'm sorry. I put Sunday live or Tuesday live, yes or no? Let me do it this way. I'm a dummy. Start a poll. Okay. So it was overwhelmingly yes. Okay. So Sunday is this is an example of bias. Do I put Sunday as yes and Tuesday as no? Because then I'm automatically kind of getting people to look at things one way or the other. I apologize. I just don't really have any other way to do it here. Sunday is yes. Tuesday is no. Okay. I don't. Again, I don't care which day we do it on. You let me know which is more accessible to people. Sunday is yes. Tuesday is no. And my apologies. Okay, I'm not as good at running polls on here as Chooch is. I mean, Chooch has got a poll like every 5 seconds. He's got a poll up on stuff, and he's like the real expert on polling. I am not the expert on polling. I very rarely do these things, so my apologies. Okay, let's see. AHR. I jumped in late. Do you think the 10 kings are prior or after the rapture? I think they're after in terms of them being put in their positions of power, but certainly I think they're alive today, and they may even be in their positions now. They're just not in that official 10 kings role. So uh, I don't know what this word means. Mycreant believer. Question: in regards to the Nephilim, spelled wrong for sure. If all comes from our Creator, how do the fallen angels have the ability to produce the Nephilim in laying with human women? Well, this is like an L.A. Marzulli question. Okay, so here's my thoughts on it, and this may not be correct. I'm kind of looking at this just from somebody that's read about this stuff over the years, but I'm not the expert in how angels procreate. Well, let's go with what we know. We know that the angels were there at creation. They saw creation happen. I think we see that in Job 38. I think that angels are infinitely smarter than we are. I mean, just from everything. Like they understand creation from the quantum level to whatever, to the biggest cosmic, whatever galaxy level. I think they understand it. So I think they have a very solid understanding of how things work. They also know, and this goes for both of the holy and the unholy angels, that they can manifest in human form or in a physical form. We see in Genesis 18 that they ate with Abraham and Jesus, or the pre-incarnate Christ. There was two angels there with them, and I think they ate together, if I'm not mistaken. Um, so they're able to process food. Clearly, they understand about how different kinds of creatures procreate. Be fruitful, multiply after your kind. This is kind of the instruction that God gives to the animals and to the plants and everything after its own kind, right? So they have that understanding too. I don't think it's a stretch for them to figure out a way to impregnate a woman or the right combinations of things that have to be in place for them to be able to impregnate a woman. Why God allows them to manifest in the human form and to what extent that looks like, I think they would have had to kind of abandon their first estate, which is their purely angelic spiritual form, to some type of physical form. And in that physical form, they figured out a way to take women and impregnate them. Again, we know that in Genesis 3, God tells Satan, we telling Eve this, and or telling the serpent this. But know what it says in Genesis 3. And it says here, speaking to the serpent, who is now Satan is possessing this body. Because you have done this, you are cursed more than all cattle and more than every beast of the field. And on your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust in all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed, talking to the serpent, but also talking to Satan, and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. So Satan has some kind of a seed. I don't know what that means necessarily, but he has some kind of way to impart part of himself into somebody else. So I'm assuming that applies to all the fallen angels as well, or all the angels for that matter. the holy angels will not violate that, but the unholy angels have already violated that, or at least a large segment of them have already violated that. So they figured out a way to do it, and there was women that were willing to take on that role, position, or whatever, and out came the Nephilim. Question: do you think after the rapture it'll be a Mad Max world? I do think there will be a Mad Max world for a little bit of time until the world, this is what we call the gap or the gap theory. I think that there will be a period of time there's a lot of chaos in the world, and however long that chaos period is, we don't know. I used to think it was going to be years, but now I don't know if it's going to be years. It could be a year, could be months. But the further that we go along, the further that we keep pushing into this time period, I think the world, more of the world, the kingdom of the beast is being set up and being structured and put together, and it's going to be that much harder for the peoples of the world to rebel the closer we get toward the time. So I think certain parts of the world will become ungovernable. Certainly, large parts of the United States will become ungovernable, and I think if you're already working outside the law or outside of the system today, I think you are much better suited to survive that Mad Max world than if you pay your bills, go to work, follow the laws, et cetera, et cetera. Like you're living inside the system, you're playing along with the system right now. There's a large segment of Americans and other people, Mexicans and other parts of the world where they don't operate inside of any kind of system. They're their own system. So for them, if the governments collapse, that really is not going to change a lot about how they live and function. It may be just more opportunity for them to be more lawless. And I think what we see with the rider on the white horse is, I'm again, I'm torn on this. I don't know if it's the man or if it's the system, but whatever. If it's the system that goes forward as this new way forward for the world, there's going to be a lot of pushback from peoples around the world. They are not going to want to come underneath some kind of global system. China, Russia, um, Mexican cartels. I mean, gangs, mafias, whatever. There's large segments of people in all different countries that are not going. They are not going to not want to be part of this new system. And I think that's a large part of what the Red Horse does is these wars that are peace taken from the earth is them forcing the world into this system. But before all that, before even the White Horse comes along, the rider on the White Horse, I think Gog Magog happens, and that is certainly going to upend the power structure in the world. I think that will neuter militant Islam forever. I think Gog Magog is the death knell for Islam. I don't think the Antichrist is Islamic. In fact, I'm very much opposed to that idea. I just don't see that as being feasible, especially after Gog Magog. Well, especially after Psalm 83, Isaiah 17, Gog Magog. I mean, you're talking about a huge segment of military age Muslim males who are going to get decimated, and it's going to kill whatever motivation they have to keep going the way they're going. So I I don't know, but I do think large parts of the United States will become like Mad Max. It'll just America's too big, and Canada, even Mexico. There's just so much of this area that's going to become. I mean, think about it this way: if all the trash workers that collect waste management, all those workers of the world, or at least of America, let's say they all went on strike, kind of like what the longshoremen tried to do a month or so ago, closing all the ports. Imagine if everybody that collects trash um, goes on strike at the same time, and you get this massive buildup of trash everywhere. I mean, that alone would become cataclysmic in a lot of places. And then on top of that, if you were to cut the internet out of, if there was a massive cyber attack and the internet everywhere shut off, again, I think that would be. I mean, it wouldn't take. What I'm saying is, it wouldn't take much for us to kind of devolve into this lawless Mad Max scenario. So I think the rapture will absolutely drive us into that position pretty quickly. Let's see. Think that is it. Is that it? All right. 2 hours, 9 minutes. Uh-oh, here's another question. Talia, I see you. They might use aliens to explain away the rapture, but how do you think they'll explain away the dead in Christ will rise first? That is a good question. Um, Invasion of the body snatchers. No, I'm just kidding. Uh, I guess this kind of goes along with the lines of um, if and this is kind of a relatively new discussion amongst eschatologists about that are pre-trib, like we know that we are caught up to heaven, and we know that we're transformed from mortal to immortal, from glory to or from incorruptible or from corruptible to incorruptible. That happens in the flash of the blink of an eye. Are we instantaneously caught up, or is it kind of like in all the other instances in the Bible where people were raptured up, but it was in full sight of everybody else? And so, if it's the former and it's like we're gone like that, including graves, upended or whatever, um, I think that's a far easier argument for the powers that be to make that alien snatched us out of the world than it is if we are changed in an instant, but then we're still here in our glorified forms for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever. People see us and then see us get caught up. That's going to be almost an impossible way to explain that away. you have to, you really have to hate God at that point to ignore that happening. So I'm kind of leaning toward the latter, but who knows? Kim says, excuse me, aftermath of Helene, we had no contact, internet, phone, text, everything was out. Everyone was packing heat like Mad Max. Yeah, for real. KG, I got you. All right, Sir Pierce Seville. I think I've got everybody here. I've got the questions. I'm kind of able to manage it from this level. Appreciate your help on that. KG, say by grace, by faith and grace. Question: Hi, Pete. I hear about the gap theory, but is there anything biblical that says there is a gap theory? um, the main thing for me is that Daniel 9:27, which covers that last 7 years. There's no connective tissue to First Thessalonians 4 or First Corinthians 15. There's not anything that ties those two events together. That's it. I mean, if the rapture caused the 70th week, obviously that would be self-explanatory. But because these I'm not saying they're two standalone events that don't have anything to do with each other. I just, the rapture does not trigger the 70th week. The 70th week is triggered by this covenant that's confirmed in Daniel 9:27. That's what starts the clock. So there's nothing to say that, I think 2025 we enter into the new Jubilee cycle. And as much as I hate to say this, there's nothing in there that says that we are taking out at the beginning of that cycle. It could be toward the end, or we could be taken out and there could be a significant gap in time. There could be 10 years, 5 years. I mean, and then the 7 years. And by the time you were, let's just say 5 years, for example. Okay. So hypothetically, let's say that we go up in 2025 or 2026, and then there's a 5 year gap. So then there's puts you at 2031, 2030, somewhere in there. It doesn't align with Christ, the 2000-year anniversary. So I set all that stuff aside for a second. I'm just looking at this as being in the last Jubilee. if if there was a 5-year gap after the rapture, let's say the rapture happens in 2025, and I'm just using that number because it's easy round number to do math with. And then there's about a 5-year gap. And so now the tribulation officially starts in 2030. Then that goes for 7 years. Now you're looking at 2037, and then Christ's return, the late 30s. That puts you inside of that Jubilee, right in the middle, kind of right there. So I think that that's a possibility. I don't know if I lean heavily on that. I do think that there is a gap in time, only because things that have to happen, they take time to happen, like the rebuilding of a third temple, the rebuilding or the building up of some kind of Babylon, Battle of Gog Magog. Um, all those things don't happen instantaneously; they take time. Especially Gog Magog, you're talking about putting this massive coalition together. And I've always viewed Gog Magog as kind of the reverse Crusades, where instead of Christians coming to liberate Jerusalem, now it's all these Muslims coming from all over, from every direction, marching, driving, whatever, trying to make it to Jerusalem to come fight, and then they're wiped out. And then the ramifications of that, if there was an earthquake at the end of Gog Magog, which there is, and if that's what destroys the Dome of the Rock and the Al Aqsa Mosque, then you're talking about clearing off the top of the Temple Mount, all that construction, getting all that stuff removed, um, going through the plans of establishing a temple, which may not happen until the two witnesses arrive. So I don't know. I happen to see a gap in time. I just know that Daniel 9:27 and First Thessalonians 4:13 through 18, those one doesn't cause the other. I think the rapture sets the conditions for the 70th week to come about, but it does not start it doesn't start the clock on it. Okay. Cindy, skip my question. Question: think Trump and Vance have anything truly righteous? Sorry, Cindy, I didn't see your question before. So I look at I, I try not to look at the personalities. I try to look at the policies. Which policies are they going to put forth that allows for the most amount of freedom, the most amount of support for Israel, the most amount of support for pro-life causes, um, the most amount of life for traditional values, like uh, marriage, children, all that kind of stuff. So I honestly think that that's redeemable for them. Are they in this poll here? Are they perfect? No. Are they uh, righteous in the sense of morally righteous? I don't think that they are. Um, other than like their work ethic, their personal moral values, like you know, Trump to me seems like a decent guy. He would uh, pay off somebody's mortgage if they work for him and they're going through a hard time or something. He does that. He's done that for decades. Um, he's just kind of way. But being a morally good person still doesn't get you into heaven. So you're still operating under the auspices of your old nature. He just had a really good upbringing. And you can look at his kids and you can see that they're, decent people, that they present themselves that way. Not saying that they are, I'm just saying that they present themselves that way. All that said, they seem to represent a more base value system than what the Democrats are offering right now. And if you watched the Al Smith dinner the other night, Trump said something that I thought was hilarious. He said he was looking at Chuck Schumer, who was sitting right next to him, and he said, Chuck, if Kamala doesn't win this time, then given how crazy your party's become, you could still run as the first woman and be the first woman president. you know, and he said that obviously tongue in cheek, kind of making fun of how just out of their minds the Democrats have become. Um, but I thought about that too for a while. And I thought, you know what? That's pretty much true. That's if Chuck Schumer wanted to run as a female president, he could, and they would probably come around to accept it. So I think there's that. Um, but they're like us. I mean, they're flawed, sinners. We're all sinners, flawed men, flawed people. Now, I will say that if you look at Donald Trump's life, I mean, that guy's been under the microscope for the last 9 years. Like, there's probably not anybody in modern history that's been investigated as hard and as much as he has. So I'm sure if there were other deep, dark secrets out there, that would have already been way exposed and stuff. So, okay, I think that's it. Cindy says, agree on righteous, but to vote lesser of two evils still equates to evil before God. But to not vote, you're basically voting for evil. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to be, I'm not trying to be rude about that. I'm just saying that's the way the system's rigged right now. If you don't vote, there's two people on the Democrat side voting for it. A dead guy, an illegal alien, whatever. We're just trying to be salt and light. And salt was used as a preservative to slow the decay. And the church right now, in this day and age, this remnant body of believers that exist, we try our best to slow the decay, and we're living in the decay right now. Are we going to reverse the decay and make everything go back to normal? No, we're just trying to slow it down. So to not vote is to vote for the left, and I'm sorry, that's just how it is today. Because they're going to have, they won't even. This is how crazy this country's gotten. The DOJ is suing the governor of Virginia because they want to clean their voter rolls, which have been in the books for years. They're getting sued by the DOJ to clean up their voting rolls, removing dead people, removing people that have I self-identified as an illegal alien, don't shouldn't be voting in the first place, people that have moved out of state. I mean, that's just common sense stuff, and they're getting sued by the DOJ. That's how wicked this has become. Rigged. We have. I mean, look, I would love for nothing better than the rapture to happen right now, for real. Like, if it happened right now, I would not be complaining. But we don't know when it's going to happen. It could be next month, next week, next month, next year, 5 years from now. I mean, do you want 4 more years of this? I can barely afford the groceries now as it is. And they're just going to keep running it into the ground until the system breaks because they want it. They have to break the system in order to get us into this new one world system. So, and it's not just you and I. I mean, most of us are. I'm assuming we're all adults in here. But what about your kids? Your kids, your grandkids. Do you want them to be forced to be indoctrinated by far left Marxist propaganda? Do you want them to be forced medical procedures done on them? Like, I mean, we got to just think about. I mean, this is one of those instances for me. It's just the collective good. Like, who's going to do the most amount of good for the most amount of people? And you know, hey, man, I would love for nothing better than Trump to be a rock solid evangelical on every point that I agree with. I just that's not reality right now. We have what we have. And I think if people write in Jesus on there or they write in some other candidate that's not on the ballot, it make you feel better, but it's not going to change. It's not going to change. And look, I don't even want to go here tonight, but vote your conscience. Let me just leave it at that. You vote your conscience. I know Trump's not perfect. I get it. And there's a million different things I could point out about Trump that I think is flawed. I could look at it purely as it's not an election, it's a selection. And to me, I look at Ken Ortiz, man, Pastor Ken, he lives up in Washington State. And because Christians didn't get involved with their voting process, they didn't get involved, they didn't go out to vote. You know what the law is in Washington now? If your kid, regardless of their age, if they come home and say, I want a sex change, and if you don't comply as a parent and take them to get their sex change, you will lose your kids. They have they have the legal right to come in and take your kids from you, and there ain't a dang thing you can do about it. So, do I want the whole nation? Do I want Texas to be like Washington State or California? No, man, there's no way. That's why we exist right now. That's why we're here. We're here to slow the decay, put a spotlight on things that need to be exposed, you know? And I'm sorry to say it like that. It's just that's the way it is. And Christians make up a big percentage in this country, but man, we've been so divided over so many little things that we've become very fragmented and we're no longer this solid voting block anymore. And what I just read earlier, um, fractured communities, uh, crisis of identity, erosion of trust. The erosion of trust thing is huge. Everything is a conspiracy now, and maybe it is. Maybe there is conspiracies. I am not. I know conspiracies exist. Trust me, I know. Like I believe there's a lot that I know are true, but we can't just totally give up and say, it's not an election, it's a selection, and we just kind of don't participate. I mean, God chose us to live in this time for this reason. I You didn't ask to be born now. I didn't ask to be born now. This is just the time when God planted us in this day and age and said, "Hey, you're gonna," looking at the little seed pod of Pete Garcia. Do I want to put you in the first century, the 15th century? No, I'm gonna put him in the 21st century. Same with all of you. We're all here for some reason. Yeah, I Jonathan Pennington, exactly. Vote, remember, don't idolize a politician. I'm not idolizing Trump. I'm not even. I know that they can't fix this world. I get that. They're not making America great again, and they're not gonna make the world great again, all that they're thinking in terms of, like, generations that we're gonna still be here. They're thinking, like, we're gonna be here for another 100, 200 years. They've got this long range mindset going on. You and I don't have that mindset. We're talking weeks, days, weeks, months, years at the most, but not everybody believes like us. You can preach Jesus and absolutely preach Jesus. And, there's an argument to be made that, yeah, the church flourishes under persecution. Um, is the church flourishing in North Korea? I don't know. I mean, none of us know. We will not, never likely know. And here's another thing too, though. I mean, the Democrats, it's been this big flip, vice versa, whatever. They are the pro-war party, man. I feel like if they stay in power, we will definitely be marched into World War III very quickly because they need it. They need to keep breaking the system, and that's one of the fastest ways to break the system. Throw us into some big conflict that engulfs the whole world, like World War II again. Man, I'm done with war. Like I just I don't want to see people die unnecessarily. The fentanyl crisis, and the border, the human trafficking. Think about that one issue alone, and that should be enough to convince you. One side wants to keep the border open, allowing for hundreds of thousands of children to be trafficked, and the other side said, "No, let's not. Let's put a stop to that." I mean, I don't know. And don't get me wrong, I love JB. And JB and I, this is kind of a well-known part where we kind of part ways politically, at least. But I love JB. I know that he speaks the truth to power, and he's got his reasons for believing what he does, and I totally respect that. I just leave it at that. Hey, vote your conscience. But you know, I don't know. That's just kind of where I'm at, and I'm a little hope. I'm slightly hopeful that Trump will win the election. I am less hopeful that they will actually cede power to him, and that may trigger something as well. Anyways, that's my 2 cents on that. Mom says 320,000. Yeah, you know what? And I saw a video today. I don't know where it was. I mean, they are finding kids' bodies everywhere. These kids that are coming up from South and Central America and being trafficked up here. Just horrible. It's man, I get it. I am not a fan of abortion. Never have been. I think it's evil. I think it's wicked. You know, I think for the time being, getting the vote, getting the removing the federal approval of abortion by removing Roe v. Wade was a huge success in terms of taking that decision back down to the states and letting the states decide that issue. I didn't think that was going to happen in my lifetime. I'm sure none of you thought it was going to happen in your lifetime, but it happened. You have states, I mean, that are voting to go off the wall with abortion, and you got other states that are kind of reeling things back in. And so I hate that there is even a thing called abortion. I hate it. But I also hate that there's human trafficking. And I mean, I don't know. You got to watch that movie, The Sound of Freedom. Watch that movie. That man, and that's just one tiny small fragment of an issue going on right now. So I don't know. I vote your conscience. Just realize the left is going to try and steal this again. So well, hopefully I didn't make you mad, Cindy. That wasn't my intent. I'm just sharing my thoughts with you. Line in the Sand and Sound of Freedom are the two ones that are dealing with this. Sound of Freedom or Line in the Sand is the oh, what's that guy's name? He does all the undercover, like, gets people to powerful people to cop to, like, what they're doing. Anyways, he goes on the migrant train. He gets on the migrant train and follows them all the way up and video documents everything and gets to the border, and you can see how jacked up our border is. James O'Keefe, thank you. Thank you, Jenny Bird. I don't know. We're just in a bad state right now. I don't see how we fix this apart from Jesus returning. He is the only true solution to this planet. So Karen Shupin, I think JB is voting libertarian. Hey, vote libertarian. Hey, you could all vote and write in my name. You know that? But it would be a giant waste of time. uh, you could vote for me all you want. That I would be a giant waste of time. Like I can't. I'm not even on the ballot, so it doesn't matter, you know. So I think judgment is coming. I think you're right too. Judgment is coming. And that's sad. That's a sad. The saddest thing to me right now is that as a body of believers, we've been so fragmented. The church has, not been immune to all of the cultural Marxism and postmodernism and all the other isms that have come out of the last 150 years. It's, Satan has been furiously working to divide the Christian church up to where we are today. We're little bitty fragments of believers, little pockets of believers, here and there. And that's not the way the church should have gone out. But anywho's, I'm looking for the rapture. I'm looking for the blessed hope. In the meantime, while I'm here, um, salt and light, busy about the Lord's work, trying to do the best we can with our families, trying to protect them, trying to feed them, trying to raise them right. Um, you know, the Lord, I will say this, the Lord knows our struggles. He is not blind to what's going on. And just like in the seven churches, the one thing he keeps saying over and over, I know your works, I know your struggles, I know where you are right now. Vote your conscience. Um, just, even beyond voting, be salt and light in your community. Volunteer at a place you can volunteer at that needs help, food pantry, nursing home, homeless shelter. I mean, whatever, prisons, jails. Just make a difference. Make a difference while you're here, even if it's just the one person. You never know who that one person's going to go on to influence, and you may witness to somebody now that hates God, hates everything, and then the second after the rapture, they're going to have that aha moment, and they'll be like, uh, "I think my friend was right." when you're no longer answering their phone calls or responding to them on Facebook. Um, One of the issues I heard, some Christians, I haven't seen it on here tonight or anything like that. They're saying, well, Jesus didn't get involved in the political system. True. He came to offer the kingdom to the nation of Israel because that's what the Old Testament had promised and prophesied, that they're going to receive this kingdom. So he comes out in Matthew 5 and says, okay, Sermon on the Mount, here we go. Which of you guys can do this? And I think most people soundly, they're like, I don't want to do that. So they were not a people fit for the kingdom, but he had to offer it to them first. And, Jesus arrived at a time in human history when the Roman Empire was at its absolute might, you know, um, and they were a dictatorship, essentially. So they didn't have voting, they just paid taxes. Democrats say vote early and vote often. Man, if you live in that state that doesn't check anything, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just saying I can't do that in Texas. But yeah, Jesus arrived at the height of the most powerful pagan empire that ever existed. So looking through that, kind of the widgets on that, one, Jesus already had a mission when he came here. Two, his goal wasn't to change Rome politically, but to change people from the inside out. Three, he knew there was going to be time. There was time involved in the spreading of the gospel. He tells them to take the gospel into all the world. Matthew, was that Matthew 28? 19, yeah. It says, go, Matthew 28:19, go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. I cannot help but think that Jesus knew there was going to be time just for them to go do that, to take the gospel out. And you're walking everywhere. You might be riding a camel or a donkey or maybe a horse if you could afford it, or you're sailing by wind power. Yeah. And, in context, Jesus wasn't sent here to change the Roman Empire, although it did change because Christianity became legalized several centuries later and then everything that happened since then. But we live in we live in a constitutional republic that functions in a lot of ways as a democracy in certain things. And that democracy has a way to tilt far left or far right. Far left, party of death, mandating abortions. I mean, it's bad. Far right, I wouldn't even say far right, just right of center. And you've got more of the party of life, people that want to just be left alone and have families and raise their kids and grow their own food and not get um, bludgeoned to death with taxes. All right, I think that's it, guys. God bless you all. Um, you know, we live in dark times. We live in perilous times. This is the times that Paul wrote about in 2 Timothy 3. And as I've said before, head on a swivel, be cognizant of your surroundings, know what's going on here and abroad. You know, go out wise as serpent, gentle as doves. Keep looking up. Christ is coming back soon. All those things. We're to be informed, understand the times. Notice that passage in Issachar regarding the sons of Issachar. They understood the times and what Israel should do. So it's not like only that they understood the times; they also understood that there was consequences their nation would go in, and they were to help kind of steer the nation one way or the other. So thank you guys. Public announcement here. Let's see if I can find it. Okay. In On November 8th and 9th in Fort Collins, Colorado, where Steve Schmutzer and his guys at the Solid Bread Community Church there, they're going to be hosting L.A. Marzulli, and that's going to be from Friday 6 to 8:30, Saturday morning 9 to 12:30, and then so it looks like it's Friday night and then all day Saturday. Tickets are $20, and if you live in the Fort Collins area, I don't think this is being live streamed or anything. I Let me double check this. I don't think it's being live streamed. Let's see. Anyways, I will post this. If you're in the Fort Collins area, November 8th, 9th, they're having a LA Marzulli up there doing a pretty cool conference. So you can make it. I'll announce it a couple more times before we get there. But again, Monday doing a roundtable, going to pre-record it there, and then that's going to post on Halloween night. That'll be myself, LA, Lee, Mondo, and Pastor Gary. talking about the Nephilim, the impacts of the Nephilim from past to present, and all the things that that touches upon. So that should be a good discussion. And then Tyler and I will do a conversation probably sometime in December or maybe January because he's going to be pretty busy here for the next month. But eventually he'll get to the point where he's going to want a break and he's going to want just to hang out with his brother in arms, and he's going to want to do a conversation with me about something interesting. Don't know what that is yet. We'll figure that out when the time comes. But Tyler, just giving you forewarning. All right. Good night, you guys. Good night, good people. Love you all, and glad that we have this little community that we can hang out with and talk. And make sure you support Chooch, Barry Scarborough, Ty Green, Carol Vay, um, Black Swan. If you still watch Black Swan, John Holler, Tom Hughes. We got our small community. Just try and keep it going as best we can. So God bless you guys. Take care, and we'll talk to you again on what's today, Monday. Talk to you again on Wednesday. We'll be going through Revelation chapter 9, demonic locust, the abyss. It's going to be chaotic. So I'll post a link for that probably tomorrow or maybe early Wednesday when we can do that. But be interesting conversation. So God bless. Good night. Talk soon.